What is a lodge? Freemasons or Masons, there is little practical difference between the two, meet in units called lodges. The lodge can refer to the unit itself or the meeting room in which the lodge takes place. All lodges have a name and a number. Numbers have been allocated in sequential order. Hence, the lower the number, the older the lodge. I have the privilege of belonging to Globe Lodge number 23, which was constituted in 1723. The name Globe is derived from nothing more romantic than the name of the tavern in the Strand, where the lodge used to meet early in its existence. It was fairly common for a lodge to be named after the tavern in which it met. These days, there are very few restrictions in naming a lodge, save that it would be most unusual for a lodge to be named after a living person, a similarity incidentally shared in the naming of public houses. At the time of writing, the most recent lodge to be founded is City Gate Lodge number 9890. In England, there are some 8,000 lodges. The apparent discrepancy between the two figures is that, not surprisingly, over the last 300 years, a number of lodges have ceased to exist, and numbers are not reissued. A further complication is that on 2 occasions, Grand Lodge has taken the opportunity of dealing with extinguished lodges by removing them from the list and renumbering those remaining. On the one hand, lodges were pleased because they were now allocated a lower number, but the lodge treasurer would have been far from pleased because it necessitated having new letterheads and summons engraved. The number of Freemasons in England is currently something in excess of 250,000. Whilst Freemasonry exists worldwide in what used to be termed the free world, this book predominantly concerns itself with Freemasonry in England. Freemasonry is and has been prescribed by extreme right and left-wing governments at both ends of the political spectrum. Freemasonry was prescribed in Nazi Germany, in the Communist bloc in general, and the USSR in particular. The notable exception was Cuba, where it has always operated quite freely. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Freemasonry has re-emerged in Russia and the former states of the USSR. Not insignificantly, it is currently prescribed in Pakistan and a number of Islamic states, but not, interestingly enough, in Malaysia, where it is flourishing. To all intents and purposes, Masonic lodges are independent, private clubs. To become a member, as with most clubs, one needs to be proposed and seconded by 2 existing members. The other members then vote whether to accept the man being put forward for membership. The vote is by secret ballot. If one has no objection to his proposed membership, then a white ball is put in a bag, or a black ball if one does object, hence the expression to be blackballed. Potential members are blackballed if 1 or sometimes 2 black balls appear in the ballot. The number of balls required depends on the individual rules of the lodge, known as bylaws. In practice, the excitement of a genuine blackballing rarely occurs. Candidates are usually interviewed by a committee of senior members of the lodge, and if there is likely to be any difficulty, then the proposer and seconder are warned well in advance and are given the opportunity of withdrawing their candidate's name before it goes to a formal ballot of the members. If, for the moment, one thinks of the lodge as just another type of club, then it is not unreasonable to have a chairman elected by the members and holding office for 1 year. Save that in Masonry, he is called the Master, or more accurately, the Worshipful Master. On more than one occasion, when having volunteered that I am a Freemason, and the person I am talking to takes a benign view of Freemasonry, something is said to the effect of, "Oh, my grandfather, father or whatever, was a Mason and was a Grand Master of his lodge." Grand Master, very unlikely, but Worshipful Master almost certainly. In the stratified world of Masonry, All brethren are equal, but some are more equal than others. Everybody initiated into Freemasonry starts as a brother, and indeed ends up as a brother. But when he becomes master of his lodge, he is then entitled to the appellation worshipful, and so is styled worshipful brother, or W-bro. Not only is Masonry stratified, it is also pyramidal in structure. At the base of the pyramid, we have the lodges. The lodges in a particular area are grouped together as provinces, which to a large extent mirror the geographical counties and are termed provincial grand lodges, of which there are 48 in England. Not to confuse matters, there are provinces overseas, but these are called districts to distinguish them from those in England. A provincial grand lodge is presided over by a provincial grand master. As he is important, he is a right worshipful brother. His deputy, however, is not as important and so is styled very worshipful brother. At the top of the pyramid is Grand Lodge, ruled by the Grand Master, who is styled most worshipful brother. One of the reasons why it is unlikely that the man in our anecdote was probably not a Grand Master is quite simply that since 1967, the Grand Master in England has been H.R.H. the Duke of Kent, and long may he continue. Interestingly enough, the progression from brother is mirrored in other organizations, not least the church, where a priest starts as a reverend, becomes an archdeacon, and a very reverend progresses to bishop as a right reverend, and ultimately, when he becomes Archbishop of Canterbury, most reverend. Similar appellations are used when addressing the mayor of a town, the worshipful, the mayor, or in the case of a city, the right worshipful, the Lord Mayor. Magistrates are referred to as their worships, and London livery companies are also called worshipful. By way of example, the Worshipful Company of Wax Chandlers. The likelihood of the average priest becoming a right reverend, let alone most reverend, is about as likely as the average Mason becoming a right worshipful. Indeed, most Masons would give an arm or a leg just to become a grand officer, let alone a very worshipful, but more of that later. I include a disclaimer for those readers who take these things literally. Masons do not give an arm or a leg to become a grand officer, even though many might wish to do just that, were there such a scheme available. The same applies to the obligation or oath taken by all Masons on their initiation, where, to the best of my knowledge and belief, no Mason has ever had to submit to the traditional penalty of having his throat cut across for disclosing the secrets of Freemasonry. Accepting the fact that a lodge is just a private club with a chairman known as the Worshipful Master, what then of the other officers of the lodge? As might reasonably be expected, as in any club or organization, every lodge has a complement of regular officers who hold office for 1 or more years. These include a secretary and a treasurer who effectively manage the day-to-day affairs of the lodge. A lodge will also have an almoner who acts as the focal point for keeping in touch with members who are not enjoying the best of health or are perhaps in need of financial assistance, together with the widows of past members of the lodge. The latter may receive at worst a card and or a present at Christmas, and at best financial assistance can be arranged if required. The charity steward of the lodge coordinates and encourages financial donations that are kept in a separate charity or benevolent fund lodge account to keep it separate and distinct from the general lodge account that is used for the day-to-day running of the lodge. Another key officer within the lodge is the Director of Ceremonies, or DC for short. The term Master of Ceremonies sums up his role. The key word is ceremonies. To understand the function of the DC and other officers, such as the wardens, deacons, and inner guard, requires some explanation as to what goes on during a lodge meeting, but more of that later. One very important distinction between Freemasons and other worthy organizations, such as Rotary International, the Lions, or Round Table, is that all monies collected, whether ultimately used for Masonic or non-Masonic charities, comes from the pockets of the members and not the general public. Much is made of the fact that Freemasons always look after their own, which is absolutely true, but not the whole story. At the time that Freemasonry was formally established in this country in 1717, there was no unemployment benefit, no national insurance scheme to provide pensions, no national health service, and no one to bury you if you could not afford it. A number of organizations have been set up over the years to provide such services and give a financial safety net to its members. Examples include city guilds and London livery companies, trade unions, Oddfellows, and the like. It is still true today that if a Freemason or one of his dependents falls on hard times, there are a number of Masonic charities that will be able to assist. These include the Freemasons' Grand Charity that provides assistance in the case of individual hardship. The Royal Masonic Trust for Girls and Boys aims to relieve poverty and advance the education of children of a Masonic family. To qualify for support, a family must have suffered a distress which has resulted in financial hardship. The Royal Masonic Benevolent Institution has been caring for older Freemasons and their dependents for over 160 years and operates 17 residential care homes across England and Wales. The Masonic Samaritan Fund provides grants to those who have an identified health or care need and, faced with a long wait for treatment, care, or support, are unable to afford their own private care. All of which sounds terrific, and of course it is, but it does not tell the full story. The advances in state provision, particularly since the Second World War, mean that many Freemasons and their dependents no longer need the level of care and assistance the various Masonic charities previously provided. The criteria used to decide whether or not financial assistance can be given are very similar to those used by the state agencies. Very useful to catch those who fall through the net or whom, for whatever reason, the state is unable to help. It means that in recent years, the various Masonic charities have made and continue to make sizable grants to a vast range of non-Masonic charities. The purpose of this book is not to extol the virtues of Freemasonry as such, and information about the range of work being done is easily found through the internet. Suffice it to say that you would be very surprised at both the range and size of the grants being made. It certainly will not be found in any of the national newspapers, but more often than not may be found in the local press. I recall a grant of £3.1 million being made to the National Osteoporosis Society in 2006 to celebrate the sesquicentenary of a Masonic organization. Absolutely no mention in any of the national media, despite it being the largest grant ever received by the society.